Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Yellhorn Podcast. You got your boy, me, Zach Lesage, and PJ. We're bringing you the heat when it comes down to what's going on this weekend based off what happened after last weekend. So, PJ, what events do we have going on this weekend? How's it going? What's going on?
Hey Zach, it's going pretty well. I'll answer those in reverse order here, but I'm actually really excited going into the weekend. I love playing in Pokemon events, as you know, being the team manager here. But I think that we have a great weekend ahead. The metagame is really shaping up, and we had a couple events over the past weekend. You know, we had a couple of championships that played out. We had a special event. We had a handful of league cups, so lots of cool decks that we saw out there, you know, topping a little bit of a change from the prior week for sure. And now we get to kind of forecast what we'll see in these other events that are happening this weekend. So Zach, you had a full rundown. We were talking a little bit earlier before the pod. Obviously Hartford, Connecticut is a big one for us because the Shuffle Squad will be in high attendance there, and we have a few other international events. So what other international events do we have, Zach?
So we have the regionals going on in Sweden, Malmo regionals, and we also have a special event going on in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So we have 3 events this weekend. Last weekend we had 3 events too in the Asia Pacific League of Indonesia and Philippines, and we also had a special event in Bogota. So a lot of kind of stuff to cover. I think PJ and we were discussing and we're like, how do we want to cover this for everyone? And we decided we could discuss Andrew's individual win at Bogota. We could discuss these results. I think we want to do a full-on dive for the triple events that we have this weekend. Hartford, Malmo, and Buenos Aires. How are we preparing for that? And what's going on? So, I don't know. I think kicking things off, I know we talked a lot about Lost Zone Box last time. I think we probably want to just like start going over, like I have the Limitless top 10 decks or top decks pulled up here. What I'm going to do is edit the tournament filter and make it sure that it's Scarlet Violet.
Yeah.
And
that way we'll hone right in on anything that's in just the current standard format, because there are, you know, obviously future formats. The Japanese format does incorporate a lot of the same decks. So if you are playing a deck now, don't be scared, because most of your favorites are going to stick around when the new set does come out. Obviously, we'll see some change there. But the bigger events, the higher attendance events that we're going to see and talk about here, I think are going to be right in the same realm with the top decks, but a little bit of a change. So I can kind of lead into that as Zach's looking through the deck list now, and we'll go through. I think that the biggest change for the meta over the past week here, I know the meta is changing week by week, but I think the biggest meta, and you could speak to this too, is Lugia is coming back. We saw a little bit of Lugia before EUIC. Lugia was okay at EUIC, obviously not some of the coolest decks, being as some of our team members played the direct counter to Lugia too. Zach and I both played Lugia at EUIC, but we're seeing it more and more at Cups, so it's kind of making us think that, hey, maybe that's one of the decks that we'll see again. Arceus Giratina has been a threat, but I think Lugia can really just pull it out a lot of the time. You know, if you flip those right cards the right way, and then
you gotta get a little bit lucky sometimes.
Right.
But what I do want to say about Lugia is I think there's a reason why very strong players are seeing very strong results with Lugia. So let's use Cal Connor, for example. Cal Connor just played in a cup, played Lugia, came second place. Why do you think they're able to kind of get through that? Well, they understand the weighted results of what a coin flip equals out to the deck, and they're able to sequence their cards in proper order to kind of minimize the luck results. So it's not to say that there's probably more coin flips in Lugia, but with more coin flips means that you can almost have results, and it's not like something like capturing a Roma. You got something no matter what. So it's all about just like finding the correct choices. Now that's not to say that if you play Lugia optimally, you're going to see success. But I think that Lugia has a very strong matchup, Lost Zone Box matchup. So if the deck destroys Lost Zone Box, can hold its own against other decks, it's a fine choice. There are other decks that just flat out beat Lugia, but quite often it does have a favorable Lost Zone Box matchup.
Exactly. And there's so many tools you can play with. There's more single prize attackers that we're seeing put into these lists that can obviously trade well with a Lost Zone list. And now the lists are becoming more refined. That's what we're
Sure.
seeing now, is that we have that standard, Urshifu seems to be a pretty decent tech in there that works. We've seen the Evil Tall be played in higher counts. The Mesagozas are going up a little bit more. We've got the collapsed stadium to take something that's been damaged off the bench, and that's been pretty much a staple from some of the lists that I've seen. Now, Zach, you recently also had a cup run with Lugia too. You did back-to-back cups this past weekend as well. So tell me how you felt going into a tournament with Lugia.
I didn't play Lugia at all.
Oh, I could have sworn I saw you play some
uh,
Lugia, but maybe that was somebody else on the team that I was.
no, that definitely would be Cal. I did play in 2 League Cups.
Okay.
I played Arctur Umbreon for
That's
my
what it was.
first League
Okay.
Cup. Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
colorless V-Star Pokemon are very
Right.
they're very similar looking. I mean, I think that deck's on the rise. If I had anything,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, the list you played is super cool. I think that my mind went there because you also played Single Strike Energy. So
yeah,
that's
probably
where
fair. Single
Yeah,
Strike's
so-
back, baby.
we were there, mid-pandemic with Single Strike. Single Strike Umbreon was the deck to beat. Mew was out there. It was just so good. And I've wanted Umbreon. I talked to Frank Persick a while ago about incorporating Umbreon with Arceus in a deck, and I know, Zach, you and I have talked about
Sure.
putting Umbreon in a deck, and now it's just the time, right? This is the time that you can put Umbreon in a deck. It's not as clunky. You do have more options with Arctura. I think that Vulpix is kind of easily countered now too,
Sure.
and then the Umbreon is just really good in a lot of situations as long as path is out of the way. And you were even playing the Tower of Darkness stadium in your list too.
I had a hunch, and it was like one of those like Friday, about to be midnight kind of hunches. Got to wake up in the cup in the early, and I'm like, what if Lost City just doesn't matter?
Yeah.
And I mean, in most cases, it didn't. I didn't lose to a single Lost Zone box. I ended up losing to Mew after back-to-back dead draws. And it can happen like that, but I do think that that's a deck to watch out for when it comes down to it. Like, if Lugia is on the rise, I think that Arctur Umbreon is on the rise. Or I'm going to say Arc decks in general, because the Arc Tina deck is really one of those things where people are trying to replicate the success of landing Caitlyn. And I think players also, like myself, want to replicate the success of Nathan Stratford and their group that's been playing the Arctur Umbreon. Another deck that I think is on the rise a little bit is Palkia. I know that we've talked about it, but...
Exactly. Yeah, Palkia I think is really good. There aren't too many lightning decks out there now because the more and more people are playing with Miraidon, I see a downtrend in the deck itself. I have seen a couple of flash in the pans that have the Flaffy, extra engine for acceleration of energies. They've been showing up. I've seen some, I don't know if it's meme quality yet, but the Magnezone EX decks that have been popping up. But overall, the grand scheme of meta, you don't see too many huge lightning attackers. You see Raikou every once in a while, but this Palkia build that you had played, and I've seen Makani Tran has been playing
Makani,
it
I
pretty
definitely
often.
took a lot of inspiration from Makani Tran there.
Yeah, so I mean, I loved Palkia when it was out. I thought it was a great deck. This is incorporating the Bibarel engine, similar to how Arctina is using it as draw support. You've got Articuno to paralyze some Pokemon. It has a lot of cool, sneaky tools, and I love that about a deck like this. And I think that it's pretty well positioned because if you look at most of the decks now, they need a wide board set, and that's where Palkia thrives, right? Everybody sets up this big wide board. Palkia comes in, does a ton of damage, and it just stomps out the competition, and it doesn't really have too many decks that it has to compete with as far as weakness. Now, Tina is probably the scariest matchup, I would assume, because they can just blow up your V-Stars pretty easily. But if your Giratina is getting paralyzed every turn, or maybe your Arc isn't setting up the right way because it can't draw as hot as something that has Radiant Greninja and Bibarel and Melanie in a deck, then you're probably having a good time with Palkia, I would assume.
Yeah, Palkia has a bunch of different kind of water tools it could pull out, where it's like against Lost Unbox, you can pull out a double Empoleon on turn 1. Well, there's your Flower Gathering, there's your Spit Innocently. Let's hope that, like, while you're struggling to find Colress off of top deck mode or with your Radiant Greninja, hopefully you could find a boss's order so you could use Flower Gathering, and then it's like, is double Flower Gathering using 2 switch cards better than a Colress? It does lead to a lot of questions. I played this to top 8 of a cup, went technically undefeated on the table. I did concede to someone in Swiss. And it's one of those things where this deck destroys Lost Unbox. Getting a double Empo destroys them. Starmie is very good. Starmie V just being able to, talking about Arc Tina, that's a deck that might have 6 energy on the board. Tina might blow up a Palkia. Starmie V might just blow up Tina. And if you can't blow them up, Articuno them. Paralyze them for a turn. And if you lose any of these cards, you could always Thornton them back. And I mean, I played a list with Crabominable V. I could deck out my opponent if they're playing like the Kyogre build, or I could, if I hit them with the Articuno, I could hit them hard with Crab the next turn after a Thornton or something like that. So a lot of cool things going on. Trainer line also has Echoing Horn, Canceling Clone, Raihan, Thornton, Roxanne. I have Cross Switchers.
It's all there.
So it can be a pile sometimes, but I think that Palkia is oddly positioned in the metagame, like in a good way, but it's also probably an inconsistent deck in some capacity.
Yeah. I mean, I've been playing a lot with the Irida engine too, and I've been using, Crabominable, setting up a play where you damage a Pokemon, and then you can still use Greninja to snipe out things. You play Cross Switcher's Canceling Cologne with a Manaphy. You could really just annihilate a board like that. And then having the plethora of water tools. I think water has been in a great spot for a while, and I think that as we move on into future formats too, not to get too far ahead of myself, we're going to have even more water options, but I think that if you haven't played Palkia ever, maybe you just started playing or just kind of missed that whole deck era, I think learning how to play Palkia is really good now too, because it's more skill expression in the deck itself, and it runs well. It's got enough tools that you can utilize within the deck to just annihilate either a cup or maybe even a regionals this upcoming weekend. So I think that that's definitely a deck to watch out for. But kind of going backwards a little bit on what I was saying, I have seen Miraidon decks pop up, which is really weird to say, and I don't know if it's good again. I played at EUIC. I played Lugia, and every Miraidon deck I hit, I 2-0'd. It was just a pretty easy deck to play against. They have those pop-off turn 1s, similar to how Mew kind of played, and if they just don't hit it, they don't really do much after that. The Flaffy engine is kind of cool. I like the builds with Raichu. I think that that's kind of neat. But I will have to say this, I'll have to mention it. I got bodied by Magnezone EX. I don't even know, maybe it's just because I didn't know what was happening in front of me because I had never seen the deck, but Magnezone EX was kind of scary, especially for those decks like Arctina, because you could set up for 1 energy, you rare candy your Magnemite, and you could just pop off just like Starmie V does, which was pretty cool. So that is a really cool deck. I still think Goodra is absolutely fine. I think Goodra is in a great place too, especially against Arctina, which has been a threat. If you look at some of the online tournaments throughout the past weekend, you see a ton of Arctina, and obviously seeing success in Portland. That is going to be a deck that everybody really wants to play. They want their little squirrel out there to put them to 1 card in hand and then draw a bunch and do a whole bunch of damage. But Goodra is really great because it prevents those 1-hit KOs. It can heal damage. So I think Goodra is in a really nice spot going into the weekend too. If you're a Goodra fan, now's your time, I would say. And then in the same realm of the pretty decent, let's get some CP to make it to Worlds type of decks, would be Gardevoir, because of the consistency level. I think that
I don't think so at all. I think
you really okay. Well, I'd like to.
I honestly, I do not like any of the last two things you just said, PJ. I'm like sitting here being like, please do not be. I mean, first and foremost, anyone who's listening, as much as we are a bit more on the competitive side here at the Elhorn, it's one of those things where play whatever deck you really want to. I don't want you to necessarily have a bad time at a regionals or think that your deck is lesser. Cards are not all made the same when it comes to a competitive aspect. And you have to decide if you're going there for a competitive aspect, maybe playing a deck that's more ranked or maybe well received into the metagame. If you're chilling and you want to play your homebrewed Arc deck or your Regidrago V-Star deck or something, by all means have the most fun at the regionals. I hope you have a great day. I think that if you're gonna have a great day like myself because you're seeing success, and that's not to say that I can't have a good time with my friends, but I'm going to a regionals because I want to see success. It's one of those things where that's where it gets to the nitty gritty. I don't think Gudra is a bad call when it comes down to it. I just don't think that Gudra's super well positioned. There's a lot of decks that are playing Escape Rope right now. There's a lot of Pokemon that can knock out Gudra. Gudra might be oddly better positioned than it was before. Because Gardevoir actually seems to be on a decline. I actually just could not recommend Gardevoir to anyone at this point. I think Gardevoir is a deck that I would not play for CP. I think Gardevoir will have spots in day 2. I think players will play it. We had Gardevoirs around me at my cups all weekend long, and that's not to say that my cups are necessarily of where the regionals is going to head or my experience is not different than others. They got gobbled up by a lot of Lost Zone Box. Lost Zone Box is still on the prowl. It's like Portland Day 2. If you look at the Gardevoir players, they lost to Lost Zone Box more often than not. And I think Grant Shen and Aiden Coos played the Mewtwo V Union builds. I think that has its own set of issues because they did not necessarily advance as far in the tournament as I think they wanted to. So that being said, I just don't think that Gardevoir is like super well positioned against this metagame, like getting path judged by Arctina. I think you lose to the Arctor Umbreon deck. I think that you probably struggle against just like random things like Mew. I think you struggle against Lugia sometimes. Like Lugia is a favorable matchup. It's not the most favorable matchup. So I look through here, I'm like, what's Gardevoir actually accomplishing beyond just being like a deck that exists? And that's kind of where I get to a lot of the point. I think if you know what you're doing with Gardevoir, by all means play it. It's cool, but you might just run into some Lost Zone Box decks and get chomped up.
Well, the reason I feel like Gardevoir might be a little bit better positioned than we think at looking at it at face value is I've seen a couple of top-end players kind of hint to going to that Mewtwo build a little bit more to be in more favor of Lost Zone Box instead of towards lists from EUIC, just the standard list. And then in turn also incorporating Klefki into the list to help out to that further extent, not only with Lost Zone Box, but also with Mew, just to kind of set yourself at an advantage. Do I think that those decks are something that I would ever want to play? Absolutely not. But I think that somebody who's practiced with the deck a little bit more maybe could see better CP. If you're a Gardevoir fan, I would honestly look to start playing a different build similar to that Mewtwo V-Union build, maybe add some Klefkis if you're going to play.
Yeah, you definitely got to shake it up. I don't think if you go with towards 60 from EUIC, you're probably getting bopped.
Yeah. So, as far as that goes, I think that if we're looking at any other deck right now, obviously the Lost Zone Boxes have incorporated Kyogre. Do we think Kyogre's dead going into this weekend still because people are expecting it now? Do you think the double Manaphy's are going to come out?
I mean, to be fair, I had double Manaphy in Portland, so I hope that people know the wave of that matchup. I think that Kyogre is still one of those things. Like, it's not a surprise when they play it, but it's more of like, can they take advantage of a board state when they play it? There's times where they've tried. I know they're getting it out versus me, and I'm like, I have to Clara here, and I cannot. Or I don't have Manaphy, or I don't have this. I think Kyogre's still good. I don't think there's a world where it's bad. I think any capacity of Lost Zone Box is probably just generally acceptable. Some are way more accepted than others.
Yeah. Yeah, and I totally agree with you on that point with Lost Zone Box. It's really pick your flavor of Lost Zone Box, whatever you feel most comfortable with. But I think that Kyogre build, if you can pull it off, and if you're practiced with just pulling off a Kyogre play late game, you will have an advantage over a lot of other Lost Zone boxes. Just for the mere fact, and I don't want to create the rumor mill here for myself, but I have been personally testing a deck that's not Lost Zone Box that still plays Kyogre. I know I'm getting a little spicy here, but having fantastic success. It is a top
Wait, say that one more time.
me.
What did you say? I know that I can listen back to the recording, but I want to hear it again in real time.
So I've been testing a deck that runs Kyogre that's not Lost Zone Box, and it does very well.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, I'm just saying that Kyogre is a force to be reckoned with, so you're not ready for your bench going into this weekend. It could be a bad time for you.
Yeah, so Manaphy stonks going up. PJ's can. You know, I said some players like to play for fun. PJ's talking about his very for fun Kyogre deck.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I see players on both sides of it, right? Like, if we look at it, you have players like Grant Manley who made top 8 at Portland's, and we can't talk like Portland like that. It was not like it was a week ago. Like those results happened a week ago.
Right.
We have those results. That's cool. But Kyogre was featured in both Alex Szymanski's top 8 deck and Grant's top 4 deck, if I'm doing that correctly.
Yes. Yep.
And then I saw Kyogre builds at my day one, my first cup that I played on Saturday. Arguably more competitive, larger cup, very big store in the Toronto area. Then there was the Sunday cup that had almost no Kyogre as far as I could tell. A lot of players cut it. Similar to how Andrew Hedrick, he just won Bogota special event in Colombia, and he cut the Kyogre. He did not play Kyogre. He played Turbo Lost Zone Box without Kyogre. Yep. I think it's one of those things where there's advantages and disadvantages for both. That's all I think I want to say is I think that there's probably no correct answer.
Right. And now here's something I'll kind of tangent on within Lost Zone Box because there are so many variants. I think that if we're talking about stonks inside of Lost Zone Box, especially if you're playing the Turbo build, I think that Pokegear is probably the biggest stonks going into this next weekend here because finding that Colress is really your bread and butter playing any Lost Zone Box because of not only some of the counters similar to Palkia playing Empoleon or Klefki or, just Judge Path. Finding your Colress to get you out of those spots is so much more important than it has been since the meta started. And I really think seeing a lot of these lists where Pokegear is cut out, I think adding it back in is really what's going to set those decks at a higher pace going into day one and day twos for the weekend.
Yeah, I think consistency is pretty good. Yeah, so in other terms, I think that the kind of Nick Moffat build that we saw at EUIC of Kyogre, Geller, and Moltres was just kind of its new way to play Kyogre. I think that one's generally under-tested, including by myself. I think that one's still got to be very good. I think that the Turbo Lost Zone Box deck is currently favoring Skysteel Stone instead of going with the Kyogre build. I think that's something Skysteel Stone's on the rise. Hit a few players playing that. I think that Radzard's probably going down. As much as it pains me to see it, and I think that it should not. I just don't think that people are necessarily favoring it to the metagame. But if you are looking for a Lost Zone Box deck to play that's pretty well positioned against most decks, Radzard might be where it's at.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think if there's any other really like Lost Zone Box build. I mean, there's sometimes a few other random ones,
right?
But I think that all the other ones are generally just going down.
Yeah.
What about Mew?
So Mew is interesting because obviously there's so much that is trying to counter Mew. Because as we saw the first few weeks of Cup season here, Mew was heavily played into Cups. So if that's what you're looking to play, just be careful because now there are all these things. There's the Galarian Moltres. You got your priority number one to beat Mew is Drapion V's. And now we even throw Umbreons into the mix. So there's all of these targets on Mew's back. Can Mew be faster? And here's where I'm kind of at with Mew is that I think that the most consistent list out there is the double turbo energy build.
Sure, yeah.
Because it's just Judge Path over and over again. It controls the board state. But I feel like maybe there is a Fusion Strike build out there that we haven't tested that is going to play that. Or maybe some extra
Draoxys.
Yeah, Deoxys. You know what?
No, it's it's not Deoxys. Draoxys.
Draoxys. Our buddy Dre. Shout out to them for playing Deoxys in their list. I mean, I was a huge hater of that card. I thought the card was trash. But then looking at it, you're like, okay, it's a single prize attacker. Yeah, you know, it can hit in the Lost Zone pretty easily. You can play that, and you can play the Meloetta. It still does enough damage. You know, you're hitting for, if you throw a DTE and a Fusion Strike Energy, it's hitting for 160. Then you can add some modifiers. Maybe you can still hit a knockout. Now you've got more chances to hit with a single prize attacker for that turn 1 donk, potentially. All of these things can come into play, and I feel like it might be a little bit faster. Is it the deck that I would want to play? Probably not in this meta. Tyranitar's also scary. Yveltal's also scary. All of these things, I think it's a great deck. I think with a great pilot behind it, it can just pop off like Mew does. Going into this weekend, I feel like there's too much dark attack, or too many.
If you're a Mew expert, go for it. If you're thinking about dabbling in Mew for the first time, you better hope that those Judge Paths better be sticking, because otherwise it could be a rough day. I've played Drapion in every Cup deck. I've played Drapion in almost every single deck that I've played in this formats, except like EUIC in 1 Cup.
Right.
And it's getting to the point where you should probably like Mew's getting beat up at Cups out here. Mew also won a Cup. It's not to say that it can't triumph, but it does get beat up on. I'm scrolling down this list. We talked about Lost Zone, Lugia, Mew, Gudra, Guardy, Arctina, Arcdura.
Yeah.
What about Lost Zone, Tina?
So I saw a build that won a Cup recently, and I've been a fan of Tina. I've promoted Tina prior to rotation. I think that Tina is a great Pokemon. Obviously, it's seeing way more success in the Arc version, but is there a world where Tina Lost Zone comes back? And I think that this build that I saw here, I forget which player, but they were playing a heavy 4-3 line of the Arctina to kind of get around those counters to Comfy and just load up your Lost Zone, blow something up, do it again, you know, rinse and repeat. Maybe going into this tournament, Tina can see a comeback. All of these bigger attackers out there, you know, we see a couple people at Cups trying out that 30 energy Kyogre deck. Wahoo, good for them. But as far as that goes, I think that there's a lot more energy in the format. I think that we're going to see some different builds come out. I know our buddy Hunter Butler was trying out a Kyogre build, or I'm sorry, a Giratina build for EUIC also that run a thin line and is mostly a Lost Zone box deck, but maybe with this thicker line, Tina could work out. I'm willing to try it because that's the first deck that I blinged out on PTCG Live is the Lost Zone Tina, and I think that it has some merit. It's definitely got a decent matchup spread. You can always throw Drapion in there too for your Mew matchups, and I mean, aside from that, I think that Thornton is a great card in that list also. I think Thornton stonks are going to be big. Between Thornton and Penny, both of them are just great. Penny great against
some cool cards.
Lost Zone box. Yeah, definitely cool cards. But if you haven't tested out those cards in your list and maybe are looking for that 60th card, either one of those are great picks, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's valid. I think that Tina's it's kind of in a similar position to Mew, where it's like if you like it, you know what you're doing, maybe play it. I think it gets beat up on by Lost Zone box, Lugia. I think that it does pretty well against Mew, can do well against Gudra, But then you get to other matchups, and I'm like, I just don't necessarily like it. So I don't necessarily feel like it's the best positioned deck. But everyone's run at Hartford or Malmo or Buenos Aires can kind of be the same. Like, if you're going to Buenos Aires, you probably want to pick a deck that's kind of local to the metagame if you've had any cups or challenges, because that's probably going to be closer. Maybe factoring in what you've seen at the other Latin America special events. If you're going to Malmo, we're probably going to be based off the results that we have similarly to Portland's, because we haven't had a event since EUIC. And I mean, for Hartford, I think we're directly looking at cups, like everything across the board. I mean, at all events, there's going to be factors when it comes down to it. I'm trying to see what other decks we got up here. I know we touched a little bit with Miraidon. I think, again, Miraidon's probably like... A lot of these decks are like, they are mid, but okay. And that's probably the best way that I'd put it.
Yeah. The only other thing I could see sneaking into maybe a top 8 spot or a top 16 spot going into the weekend is Control. That's the only other thing I could see out here that would do well behind somebody that can pilot it well. And I, myself, love playing Control. Do I feel confident enough in this meta to play Control? No, I love the Mewtwo v Union builds. The Snorlax build is very cool. There's way too much that's already known about the deck for it to do well, in my opinion. Maybe Sanders' Mimikyu V control comes out.
I think it's too hard. Like, if you ask me to explain this deck to someone in simple terms, I would not come down to it. If you ask me to pilot this deck well enough to make day 2, I don't know if I could do with it. And I think that Sander knows these decks to such a greater degree than most, because it's like he's dedicated his life pretty much to playing Control at this point. Like, his Pokemon playing career has been playing Control, which is super cool, but it's not necessarily not without fault either, right? The same way that I generally have always been like, oh, I'll play meta most of the time. It's not always the correct call. In this case, I think, sure, it wouldn't be that surprising to see a Control build see success, but I think that there's just so much like random counters to it nowadays.
Exactly.
Penny's becoming a stock card in many lists, including Lost Zone Box. When they have all these things, it just really makes it tough. So
it does.
Why don't we just quickly run down the list? We'll recap a bunch of different decks, and then we'll just kind of go with our thoughts on, is it good, is it bad, is it good, or is it great? We'll kind of rate it on those 3, and we'll go one for one each. So we'll start off with I don't want to generalize Lost Zone Box, but we'll go in Lost Zone Box each. So I'll let you go, PJ.
Sure. Okay, so Turbo Lost Zone Box, I think, is a great...
No, just Lost Zone across the ball.
Oh, Lost Zone. I mean, I think Lost Zone, if you don't know how to run it, don't play it this weekend. If you've been playing it for a while, because it's been out for a while, it is a great deck. It is a fantastic deck.
Gotcha. I feel like I wish I kind of had a 5-way rating, because I'm actually just going to give it a good deck. Okay. While I do think it has the tendencies to have great aspects about it, if you're heading into this weekend, I do think Lost Zone Box might struggle a little bit as the meta is kind of developed. Watch Lost Zone Box win, but we haven't had Lost Zone Box win in a hot minute if we exclude the Bogota special events. Lugia, PJ.
I think Lugia, for me, it's always going to be a good deck until maybe the newer set comes out with some more special energy support. I think that if it is in a field of Lost Zone Box, again, it will do really well. So I'm just going to go middle of the road, leaning towards great deck, but it is definitely a good deck for me.
Gotcha. I'm going to give Lugia middle of the road kind of pick for this weekend. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's bad. I think it's one of those things where, like, if you're playing that deck, you hope to hit some matchups. If you hit some other matchups, you're going to have a tough time.
Yeah. Path is scary. Tina with Belt is also scary, so...
Yeah, there's definitely some scary things. What about Mew?
I'm going to say, this is hot take, I'm going to say Mew's bad this weekend.
I'm also going to agree with you. I think Mew is probably unfavored this weekend. I'm a little bit worried that every single deck is pack and dark. If you're the Mew that dodges it all, though, congratulations.
You've made it.
Shout out my homie Mew. I'll be like the Little Wayne meme where they're like, he's like looking at the Gucci and they're like, Gucci who? If we're looking at like the top 8 of a thing, I'll be like, Mew made it. Shout out to them. Yeah, so good for them. They definitely swam through the shark infested pool to get there. Goodra,
I'm gonna say is good. That's a middle of the road deck also.
Gotcha. I think that Goodra is good leaning towards bad. So I think that it's okay. I think that it can sometimes finesse a Lost Unbox player. Sometimes it cannot. And sometimes I feel like it gets bopped. So that's where I'm at with Goodra. We wish them the best. We'll go with Gardevoir in general.
Okay, Gardevoir in general. I mean, current builds that I've seen, just on paper, I'm gonna say bad. I feel like we'll have a sneaky one, but current builds, I'm gonna say no.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, I think for Gardevoir, I think I want to put Gardevoir bad. Not like the lowest of the lows. I don't think it's that bad. Gardevoir in a nutshell is the best deck in formats. And that's when we don't account for other decks in the formats.
Right.
If we look at all the other decks in the format, I think that Gardevoir is literally trying to get toasted at this upcoming weekend. Yeah. So we'll see.
If there was no spread decks in the format, Gardevoir would be great.
Well, if Path didn't exist, and then we get into a bunch of stuff.
Too much Path in the format.
And then Mirror is also not the most fun matchup that I saw. I've watched a lot of high-level Gardevoir Mirrors sitting beside me at Portland's, and I was like sick. Shout out. It's a tough matchup.
Arctina, I think is still good, unfortunately, because there's not a lot going on. It's the Arc Dura of the format because there's not too many attacks, but this one has more draw. And because it has more draw, it can find the things to do the other things faster, and it's got Judge Path, can still get around its own Judge Path, blows whatever it wants up. And it even has a little bit of healing option in there. It's got, some spicy text you can add in because it's got that 58th and 59th tech slot in the deck that you can also swing into. It can utilize Belt when it needs to. I think it's the whole package going into this weekend. And it's unfortunate because I wasn't the biggest fan of the deck itself, and then also shout out to TSS for getting bopped by it on stream a couple of times last weekend. But
that plot armor Squabbit. Shout
out to Squabbit, but left a pretty bad taste in my mouth to watch the deck, and I also did get bodied by it at EUIC a couple of rounds. So aside from that, that's my take on it. That it is good, but I don't want it to be. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think it's good. I'm exactly with PJ. It's good. I don't want it to be. It kind of goes against all of my Arceus knowledge that I've played all season long. Not a fan of the deck, but I do think it has its tendencies to be good. Also, I do want to rewind myself. I realized I was probably a little bit too harsh on Lost Unbox. I think Lost Unbox is probably always great. I just think that you have to be aware of more counters in the metagame. So I am going to go back and change it. I realized we're recording this on a Monday morning. I just got back from a Double Cup weekend. Maybe I celebrated a little bit too hard last night. And I'm going to be like, Lost Unbox is back on it. Very great. Moving on, Arc Dura. And I think we'll go with Arc Dura overall instead of like going with the Alolan Vulpix or Umbreon builds. Where do you think it's at, PJ?
Well, I was going to ask you because you're the Arc Dura player here, but I'm going to say really good going into this format, which is surprising of me to say because you've told me many a time, PJ, you should just play Arc Dura this weekend. And I'm like, nah, not this weekend. But I really think that this weekend, it's got it all. It's really, you can throw an Umbreon package in it. You could just not throw an Umbreon package in it. You can throw Karen's Conviction in there. You can throw Single Strike Energy in there. It's got a plethora of different things in it now. And I think Arctura is honestly in the best spot it could possibly be, aside from getting Judge Path to death, which I think it can still get around, honestly.
Yeah, I think Arctura is actually great. And that's no personal bias towards the deck. The deck got better with Single Strike Energies, and I think Umbreons and that whole package seems very well positioned in the metagame. Both myself and Michelle, another TSS member, we both went undefeated in Swiss Saturday and Sunday. We both did not play the deck both days. I wish we did not have enough cards. Now I have enough cards, so maybe I'll play that deck. But we'll see how it goes. I think I'm also considering a few other things, but I think Arctur has gone stonks.
Absolutely.
Lost Zone Tina.
Lost Zone Tina, unless it's your favorite deck on Earth, I wouldn't play it this weekend unless you've had hours and hours behind it, learning the matchup and every possible bad thing that can happen to you and how to get out of those bad things. I wouldn't play it. I mean, I could be completely wrong and somebody's got the perfect 60 that go into this weekend, but I'm going to say it's still unfortunately a bad deck, and I don't want it to be, but it is.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty bad call. Again, feel free, if we're wrong, call us out. These are just our own opinions, and they don't mean nothing. We don't, whatever works out. If y'all want to buy some cards from Alice, that's sick, and that helps out Shuffle Squad. That helps out the Elhorn podcast. Buy any of these cards. Buy the ones that are the most expensive, the graded cards. Buy sealed. Tinas are kind of cheap.
If you win with a deck, you can get all those cards graded, and now you can throw them up on your shelf.
Yeah, just but like it's one of those things where, Tina, I'm not feeling.
No.
Miraidon.
I was just going to ask you, how do you feel about Miraidon, Zach?
I want to say that I think Miraidon is not good for this weekend. I've heard some mixed things about Miraidon and how Magnezone V-Star, because there's not only an EX Magnezone, there's Magnezone V-Star, and that's the one that does the 90-90 V-Star attack, and it has I think it does 180 in search your deck for 2 items. There's some cool stuff going on there. I think that that's a little bit of cope. I think people are coping with that a little too hard because
I don't know. I like the Raichu. I like the Flaffy, but Flaffy seems like it gets bodied by Greninja pretty easily. I really like the Magnezone V and V-Star. The more and more I see it played. So if you're looking for that different deck to play for a weekend, maybe you've already got your CP and you want to try something new out, I think that's definitely a way you could go. I mean,
think people who already have their CP are like they're either going for a stipend, they're going there to try to win the regionals. So I don't know. Like it might be fun to play around. Like I definitely play that deck at a challenge and be like, because I use cups and challenges as my testing grounds.
Right.
Don't use them for testing grounds if you're going for your invite. By the way, just want to throw that out there.
Exactly. If you're really like on the verge, like maybe you need a CP to get your invite and you're going to one of these regionals, probably not the deck to play. Definitely don't play Miraidon. Play something a little bit more consistent. I mean, I think the deck is fun, but I feel like it's got a lot of problems late game, and that's why I wouldn't play it. But I think that it can do well. It can run hot. It is a run hot style deck. It's the yellow fire deck of years past. So it runs real hot at the beginning and then slows right down in the middle. So that's the problem Miraidon has. And if you found a build that can make it work all the way through an entire game or a set of 3, more power to you. But I'm going to just say it's a good deck.
Sure. Valid. Inteleon Urshifu. I'm going to say not good. I think
I don't like this deck.
I think that this deck is like it makes it like it has the appearance on the outside of being so big brain that you're like you feel stupid by not knowing how to play this deck and that it's not working well enough for you. I think the fact that no one's able to break this deck so far tells me that it's just probably not good. Like, we
Yeah.
would have saw it at EUIC. I think people pulled out all the stops at EUIC. I think people are pulling out stuff at Cups as they're finishing out their invites. I think we've seen a lot of this format. I'm not necessarily getting surprised at this point.
Right.
We'll see how it goes.
I did play it at my locals. I will say it because I wanted to test the deck, right? And my biggest takeaway for this deck is that it didn't draw. So I needed more pieces, and I wasn't getting the pieces that I needed. And if you set up poorly at the beginning of the turns, you get a bad hand or two bad hands. You're just draw passing. But if the deck sets up on its own and you're just, organically drawing the cards you need, it is a great deck. But the biggest problem with is that it just doesn't draw. So if you could find a way to make it draw, I don't know, maybe take out your Alakazam, put in a Ninja, I don't know what you're, put in a Cricketune V. If you're going to try to make it draw some cards, I don't know what it needs to do myself. I love deck building. I love the aspect of Pokemon. This deck makes my head hurt to try to get it to work the right way. So not the deck for me.
That's fair. That's fair, I think. Control box. We'll probably just say control altogether. I want to say, I know that you said it could make top 8s. I think it could still make top 8. I don't think that necessarily means it's a good pick. Unless there's some kind of deck that you're able to wrap around that just bodies Lost Zone, Lugia, Mew. Like, there's so many variation in this format. It's not like it's just one best deck, and even the best deck is like split into 4 or 5 different Lost Zone variants.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you're a special type of individual like myself, you love playing degenerate decks, and you've got a control build, then go ahead and play control. But as an overall deck pick, if you're looking at the meta and you're like, maybe I'll play control, that sounds fun, don't do that. If you've been playing control and you've been testing, maybe with a testing group, a specific control, go ahead. But if you've got 0 hours behind it, or maybe only 20 games or so, don't play control. You're just going to have a bad time if you're going to play to win, for sure. Maybe challenges could be okay for control. People wouldn't expect it. I don't know if you want to play fast enough for that best of 1 format with control, but probably not. What about Palkia?
Yeah, Palkia is probably the last deck that I'd go on here before we get into pure obscure territory.
Yes.
I think that Palkia is a great call for this weekend. I feel like that deck to me has the most element of surprise.
Yes.
And I think that there's a lot of players that don't know what a Palkia list looks like. They do not know all the tips and tricks and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I ripped out cross switchers to win a game at my cup, and they're like, "You play cross switchers?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just holding on to all this juice."
Yeah. Cross switcher stonks. I put it on my Twitter last week. It's good.
Cross switchers, bring up your Manaphy, canceling Cologne, Palkia V-Star, use that ability, Radiant Greninja, 2 prize cards. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in that deck, and I think
absolutely. It's got the draw. The big thing I will note that Palkia also has going for it, especially against the plethora of different type of Lost Box out there, is that it plays Lost City. And I talked about this on the last podcast, that Lost City is a fantastic card in this meta. It might not be great in the Arc Dura builds anymore, but I think that Lost City has some merit if you're going to play those single prize decks, because Clara is something that they need to get. They need to use their supporter for that turn to get those Pokemon back. If the Pokemon aren't there anymore, that Lost City is really putting in some work, and it's just stopping that deck in its tracks and stopping your opponent from playing. And if there's one thing, again, going back to being a control player, I love stopping my opponent from playing the game, and that's what Lost City does in Palkia. And I really think that is also why it's so greatly positioned in this meta.
Yeah, I don't disagree. So that's where we're at. Hopefully, I think the only ones that we said that were pretty great picks for this weekend were Lost Unbox, Arc Dura, probably the Umbreon single strike package, and Palkia are probably the top 3 picks that I'd say going in for this weekend if you wanted anything that's going on. I'm also going to be doing a meta forecast, kind of the best decks again this week is my personal video, so I'll probably jump into decks and lists, so stay tuned for that. Probably going up Tuesday or Wednesday this week. We'll see how our schedule works out at Shuff.
Right.
And I guess we'll see how these decks work out for late night tomorrow. I do want to touch on late night.
Yes.
Fingers crossed that it's stable on a Tuesday to run it.
Yeah. I know it's been a struggle, and that's where we kind of wanted to, at least touch on or talk about late night events. I know a lot of people are trying to play for that, win a trip to Japan, and our heart goes out to everybody that has been playing, and thank you so much for sticking with us and playing and chatting with us in chat. It has been a difficult ride for not only Zach and myself. I mean, I've been kind of running the EU time, and Zach's running the NA time, and managing that around all of the bugs and everything that's happening. It's heartbreaking on all fronts, and we really want to make this thing work for everybody out there playing. So shout out to all the players for late night for sure. We will try to make things happen. I think Zach and I have one final experiment this week to try out to see if it does work, and if not, we'll make some changes to make the tournament work best for everybody involved, and just kind of go from there. But we really want it to work. We're trying our best. It's unfortunately out of our control, but again, super huge thank you to everybody sticking behind us here at the Late Night crew and the Shuffle Squad crew to make this thing actually get off the ground and keep on trucking, as they say.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like we said, we're going to keep on running late nights and seeing how it goes. That being said, if Tuesday is not going to work out for the foreseeable future, I do want to say that, we're okay to cancel one per month when there's maintenance, or cancel whatever when it comes to maintenance. And maybe we decide to move those to Wednesdays if that's feasible for us. Again, if we don't have the staff to do it, we are just not going to ruin our lives to run an online tournament that we provide to the community for free. So, and that's not to sound snark with it or anything. It's just these events require time, effort, planning, a bunch of staff, a bunch of room, all that side, whatever.
Right.
It's easier for us to cancel it if we can't run it on another day. We just can't. It's the same way that, do you have plans on Saturday? Oh, you're working Saturday. I'm not necessarily going to go out of my way, but it cannot 100% work with my schedule.
Correct.
That being said, we will look and see exactly how it all turns out. And we are always going to do everything in best interest of late night staff and the community, and see how that goes. But we'll see. Hopefully it ends up working out for, at the time of recording, it's tomorrow, but we'll see when this podcast episode goes up. Hopefully late night goes smooth. Wishing future Zach and PJ some good luck, and all the staff there. Anything else, PJ, that you want to touch on before we head off here today?
Not necessarily, but if you do see us out and about at events, I know we've got a challenge coming up with myself and Little Dark Fury on our way to Connecticut on Thursday. So if you are in the upstate New York area and you wanted to stop by and say hi to both of us, we will be at Storytellers in Whitesboro, New York. If you want to stop by and say hi, get something signed. And then if not, if you can't make it to that, most of the Shuffle Squad will be at the Hartford, Connecticut regionals this coming weekend as well. So be aware that we're there, and you can say hi. We're more than happy to say hello to a listener of either the Yellowhorn podcast or a viewer on the Shuffle Squad. If you enjoy what we do here, come say hi to me.
Yeah, for sure. Same thing here. Like PJ said, a lot of Shuffle Squad members are going to be there, and it's going to be a good trip. So if you're going to Hartford, or if you can still get into Hartford, I'd recommend going. If you're going to Malmo, or if you're going to Buenos Aires, best of luck. If you're battling it out at Cups Challenges at home, choose the right events for yourself. If you have your 6th regional BFL, probably better to play Cups Challenges. If you're local to Hartford, maybe play in the regionals. Again, I think there's at least a cup at Hartford too, so a lot of opportunities to play there. We'll probably do a Hartford recap next week. I'm not sure what else we have, but if there's any topics that the viewers want, by all means, let us know in the comments below. If there's a podcasting service that we don't have it up on, we're actively adding it to other things, but for now we have Apple, Spotify, I think iHeartRadio, stuff like that. Some cool things going on. So hopefully it's on your favorite thing. But yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy this episode. Best of luck at your events this weekend, and we that's it.
We'll talk to you later. This has been the L Horde Podcast, the competitive Pokemon TCG podcast. We'll catch you all next time.
Take it easy. Bye.
The Shuffle Squad is proudly sponsored by Ultimate Guard. Ultimate Guard provides premium protection for your cards. If you need anything from sleeves to deck boxes, then Ultimate Guard has you covered. If you're a player or just a collector, you know that your cards will be protected. Check out their top-of-the-line katana sleeves. These are the best sleeves on the market with a clear window for visibility and provide a perfect shuffle. If you're not a fan of clear windowed sleeves, then Cortexes are for you. These matted sleeves are like their katanas, but at a lower price. Their shuffle is just as good and the protection is superb. So, what are you waiting for? Help support the team by checking out the affiliate link below and ordering some fresh Ultimate Guard products today to get you shuffling.
The Shuffle Squad is proudly sponsored by Atlas Collectibles, the best place to buy any trading card game product online. Visit atlastcg.com and at the checkout screen make sure to use code TSS12 to save an unbeatable 12% off your entire order. Atlas Collectibles will ship your product anywhere in the world, so make sure you're taking advantage of the 12% savings with TSS12. And if Pokemon is not your thing, don't worry. Go to atlastcg.com and see all the other amazing trading card game products they have there to offer.
The Shuffle Squad is partnered with PTCGO Store to provide our community with the best access to Pokemon TCG codes. They have codes available 24/7, instant email delivery, and you can save 5% off by using code TSS5. If you're a YouTube member or Patreon supporter, you'll have access to a special code that gets you 10% off. So what are you waiting for? Use code TSS5 today and save 5% on your next order of codes on any codes available at ptcgostore.com.
Are you trying to be the best like no one ever was? Now is your time. Head on over to metafy.gg and search out all our amazing Pokemon TCG coaches where you can book all sorts of training plans ranging from deck help to full season sessions with your favorite coach. What a great way to up your game. Check out metafy.gg in the description below and take your game to the next level. Challenge yourself against trainers from around the world to compete for the biggest online prizing yet.
Are you ready for an unbelievable tournament unlike anything else you've ever seen before? The Shuffle Squad is proud to announce our newest tournament series, the Late Night Event, with an amazing grand prize that's bound to have you excited.
Players can compete via play.limitless.tcg.com's online tournament platform every Tuesday to get a chance to earn weekly prizes. And every week, your placement in the tournament is tallied by points based on your best finishes to earn your rank for the Late Night Invitational event.
The series will be conducted starting February 7th of 2023 and carry all the way through to the Invitational on July 9th of 2023, where the top players will be rewarded the grand prizing.
And the grand prize is a signed jersey and photo op with the entire Shuffle Squad, as well as a fully paid trip to the Pokemon World Championships in Yokohama, Japan. This includes hotel and airfare, whether you're a player or a spectator.
Don't forget to check out all the live coverage on our YouTube and Twitch channel of the top cuts of these events for every week. And subscribe so you can get notified where to watch the Late Night Events Invitational brought to you by the Shuffle Squad. Now get out there and start winning. We'll see you in Japan.